All right, get ready for this. What if I told you that an AI just making up facts, those tragic Boeing 737 MAX disasters, and even the process of aging itself are all caused by the exact same problem? And get this, the solution to all of them is basically the same as fixing your printer when it starts printing total gibberish. Sounds crazy, right? Well, let's dive in.
So let's start with a really big question, one we all think about. Is aging just inevitable? Is getting old a fundamental law of the universe? I mean, you look around, you see things rust, break down, decay. It really feels like an unavoidable hardware problem, you know? But what if I told you that recent breakthroughs are suggesting we've been looking at this completely wrong?
Yeah, the entire foundational assumption has been flipped completely on its head. See, the new thinking is that aging isn't your body's hardware failing, like a car rusting out. No, it's much more like your body's software getting corrupted. Think of a scratched CD. The music, the actual information, is still on the disk, but the player just can't read it correctly anymore. And the beautiful thing about corrupted software? Well, it can be rebooted. And this quote right here from researcher David Sinclair just nails it. He's a huge champion of this new idea. His whole information theory of aging basically says this. Think of your DNA as the stable digital hardware. It's the blueprint. But the epigenome, that's the software. It's what tells your cells which parts of the blueprint to read, which genes to turn on or off. And over time, that software just gets noisy, scratched, and the cells start to forget their identity. They literally forget how to be young. But the key is the core genetic information. The blueprint itself, it's still there, perfectly intact.
And look, this is not just some cool theory. It has actually been proven. In a landmark study, scientists literally induced old age in mice by scrambling their epigenetic software. But then they rebooted the system. And what happened? They restored vision to blind mice. In another mind-blowing study, they took mice that were basically the equivalent of 80-year-old humans and extended their remaining lifespan by 109%. Let that sink in. They didn't just slow aging down. They reversed it.
Okay, so reversing aging. That's absolutely incredible, right? But this is where the story zooms out and gets so much bigger. Because that same exact mechanism of failure, this loss of the original information, it's not just a biology thing. No, it turns out it's a universal pattern. It explains why all sorts of complex systems break down.
Just look at this pattern. It's the same thing over and over. In biology, you've got the DNA, which is the perfect youthful program. But then epigenetic noise comes in, corrupts the message, and you get aging. Okay, now look at AI. The model starts with a goal, a source of truth, but hallucination acts as noise, corrupts the instructions, and you get false outputs. And in big organizations, the leadership has a clear strategy, but bureaucracy, office politics, information silos, that's all noise that distorts the message, and you end up with catastrophic decisions. You see it? It's the exact same story everywhere. The system simply loses track of what it's supposed to be doing.
And believe me, this isn't some abstract academic idea. The Boeing 737 MAX crashes, they happened because the pilots lost crucial information about a new flight control system. An AI hallucinates when it gets disconnected from the ground truth it was trained on. And get this, a staggering 67% of major medical errors come down to a communication failure, a doctor literally losing critical information about their patient. The consequences of this information loss, they're real and they're absolutely devastating. So, if the problem is truly universal, you have to wonder, is there a universal law that describes it? Well, it turns out there is. People are starting to call this the physics of alignment, and the whole idea can be captured in one single, really elegant equation.
Now, to really get the equation, we first need to talk about a concept called mutual information. I know, it sounds super technical, but stick with me, it's actually simple. It's just a measure of how much knowing one thing tells you about another. Think about it like this. If your weather app and the actual weather outside have high mutual information, your app is useful, right? But if they have zero mutual information, well, your app is just guessing. It's basically a way to put a number on how much a system actually knows about the goal it's trying to achieve.
And that brings us to the core equation itself. Yeah, it's got a super fancy name, but honestly, you can just think of it as the physics of common sense. All it's saying is that the mutual information, that's the I, between a system's goal, the G, and its own internal state, the Z, has to stay above some minimum safe level. Or, to put it in plain English, to do the right thing, you first have to know what the right thing is. The second a system starts acting without knowing what it's doing, that's when disaster happens.
Okay, to make this crystal clear, let's go back to that perfect analogy, the broken printer. Your printer starts spitting out total nonsense. What's the first thing you do? You don't take it apart and start soldering the motherboard, right? Of course not. You reinstall the driver. And why does that work? Because the hardware is totally fine. It's the information channel, the connection between your computer's goal and the printer's action that got corrupted. Reinstalling the driver is just restoring the original, clean information. The system isn't actually broken. The signal just got noisy.
And this leads us to a really profound conclusion. If all of these huge, seemingly unrelated failures stem from the exact same root cause, information loss, then the solution is always the same. We just need to reinstall the driver. The only trick is figuring out what the driver is in each different situation.
Okay, let's take AI. We have all seen a large language model just confidently make stuff up, right? That's what we call a hallucination. And it happens precisely when the model's internal state, its Z, drifts too far away from the ground truth, its G. The mutual information drops below that critical safety line.
So what's the solution? Well, you essentially build a reinstall driver button right into the AI. You can create safety layers that act as a gatekeeper. So before the AI gives you an answer, the system does a quick check. Hey, is this statement actually supported by the source data? Does my internal state have high mutual information with the truth? If the answer is no, the system blocks the garbage output and forces the AI to go back, find the correct information, basically to reinstall the driver before it's allowed to speak.
All right, now let's apply this same logic to medicine. We already talked about how errors can happen when a doctor's understanding gets disconnected from what's really going on with the patient. But it's also happening on a cellular level. Remember? Aging is what happens when a cell's software gets disconnected from the original DNA blueprint.
And you know what? The solutions are exactly the same principle. That cellular reprogramming stuff, that is literally reinstalling the driver of youth in a cell. It's restoring that lost connection to the original DNA program. And in a hospital, things like checklists and structured communication protocols, they're designed to do the exact same thing for doctors. They force a restoration of information, making sure the doctor's understanding is perfectly aligned with the patient's reality before any big decision is made.
Okay, so when you step back, you see that this is a really powerful new way to look at the world. It reframes so many of our biggest challenges. They're not these inevitable forces of decay or super complex, unique problems anymore. Instead, they're all just a version of a single, and most importantly, solvable information problem.
And let's not forget how high the stakes are here. This isn't just a cool thought experiment. When we correctly see aging as a software problem and we reinstall the driver, we get that 109% increase in remaining lifespan for old mice. Just imagine the potential if we start applying this way of thinking to all the other complex systems out there. It's absolutely staggering.
So the ultimate takeaway is really this simple. For decades, in so many different fields, we've been acting like mechanics, trying to fix broken hardware. But the whole time, the real problem was corrupted software. The big shift is from thinking the system itself is broken to realizing it just lost the instructions. And so the solution isn't to replace all the parts, it's to restore the original, clean information. And that brings us to the final question for you. Because this principle, it doesn't just apply to cells and supercomputers. It applies to our jobs, our teams, our projects, even our own personal habits. The next time something isn't working, ask yourself, maybe the parts aren't broken. Maybe the system has just lost the signal. So I'll leave you with this. What information in your world has gotten corrupted, and what driver needs to be reinstalled?